how do you define what is a life well lived, since this is the central inquiry of the blog?
Right. Well, I think in a word, it's joy, but it's a little deeper than that. I think I spent a long time trying to think about what was my purpose as I started this, so I could focus my writing. And after quite a while, I thought, my purpose for the balance of my life is to enjoy a meaningful life. Now, on the surface, that sounds hedonistic. I mean, you think, what do you mean? Your life's just about fun? No, I said meaningful. And meaning to me involves connection, because without connection, we lose meaning. And so if one can both be connected and grow those connections and also experience joy that transcends circumstance, that's a pretty strong shout. And so the older I get in life, Aviv, I notice that people kind of fall into two broad categories. And I'm fascinated by these categories. The first category is people who are happy no matter what. And the second category, and you may have guessed it, is people who are unhappy no matter what. And I watch these people, and some of them are dear friends, some of them are family members. And I wondered what defines these two groups of people. And in the end, I think it has to do with spirit. And I define spirit not so much in a religious context, although it doesn't exclude religious context, but spirit is that in-betweenness. The spirit is, there's you and there's I, and there's something in between us that we both see. You will never know the we that is you and I from my angle. I will never know the we that is you and I from your angle, but there's something there, and it's very powerful. And I notice that people who are joyful, despite tragic life circumstances, have a lot of spirit or a lot of we in their life. And those who are not joyful, and in fact, the opposite, have a poverty of that we in their life.
You also say that meaning is about finding one's place in the world and seeing where one fits in the bigger picture in a way that makes sense. How do you mean that? And is the invitation there that we can develop it, that we can have a choice about it? Is it intuitive? How do you, from your own observation of life and of people, how do we find meaning? Is this something we go about searching and it finds us? What is the journey of finding meaning?
Well, there's two ways I'd like to answer that question. The first is the question about where we fit in is a question that ultimately asks, where do we connect? And I think that to a very, very large degree, awareness, the basic facility of being aware that we're aware, is taken for granted. And yet, if we want to just for a moment lapse philosophical about it, the only way we can know the world is through this facility of awareness. And yet we take it for granted. And so when we feel unconnected, when we feel that maybe life is meaningless, I think that's a symptom of lacking connections. And it's a symptom of underdeveloped awareness. And as we develop awareness, whether it's through a sitting practice or whether it's through communing with nature, or whether it's through just catching yourself in the moment, the more we develop that awareness, the more we develop that presence, the more connections begin to emerge. And suddenly life isn't about me, it becomes increasingly about we. And so I think to answer your question, how we find meaning is basically a question of how do we expand awareness? And in my own personal journey, I love to read philosophy. I love to read religion. I had hundreds of books, on my bookshelf that I read over a 30-year period. And I was convinced that if, kind of the smorgasbord, take a little bit here, take a little bit there, take a little bit here, because I don't observe one particular religion myself, but I like to draw on all of them as need be. And I thought I would eventually develop an algorithm, develop a rubric, maybe is a better word, for where the meaning was in my life. And one day, and I can't remember, I would love to find this quote again if any of your listeners know it, but it was Aldous Huxley. I was reading his book, and he said, the path to the imminent, and in the context here, he was talking about meaning, the path to the imminent by way of intellect is impassable. And I thought, oh my, because I'd spent 25 years and hundreds of books and bookshelves full of stuff trying to find that path. And here's this person who's writing I respected saying, the path by way of intellect is impassable. This was about, 15, 20 years ago. And from there, I decided, well, that fits my bias because I've spent 25 years and haven't found that. And so I stopped or detoured the path I was on and began a very serious contemplative practice. And that turned out to be where meaning resides. It resides in here and how the in here connects with the out there. For me, anyway.
So what is part of your contemplative practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been evolving. So I have had a sitting practice for, 15 years or so where I don't know what the names of this are. I'm self-taught, but I'll sit in just awareness without thought and just be, so whether you call that mindfulness or some kind of meditation, I don't know what the name of it is for. And then the second thing I try to do is I try to catch myself in the act of not being present. I get irritated quickly by long grocery checkout lines and long post office lines and people who insist on driving in the left-hand lane at 10 miles an hour below the speed limit, stuff like that, stupid little things. And yet they set me off. And I try to, when those things happen, catch myself and say, who is angry right now? Or who is frustrated right now? And how does it feel to be frustrated? And why are you frustrated? And when you begin that kind of inquiry, suddenly, and it's through no effort, suddenly you drop back into presence. And it's my experience that when a person's truly present, wisdom just manifests. Wisdom may be something that, I like to pursue wisdom. Well, you can't pursue wisdom. I think wisdom manifests when we become really present to life. So that's the second way. The third way that I practice regularly is I kind of coined the term disciplines of seeing. So what I do, I love photography. Every time Canon releases a new professional camera, I'm usually guilty of purchasing it. And I watch light. And if light strikes something in an unusual way, I'll take a photograph. And in the process, I try to notice something each week that wasn't there the week before. And I have a beautiful place to do that here in the North Woods of, Wisconsin. But, maybe there was a flower that wasn't here last week, or maybe there's a little toad in the yard that wasn't here last week. And when you force yourself to slow down, to be present, and to look at light, all of a sudden, and I wasn't trying to think this, one discovers that, wow, everything's interconnected. And, maybe I'm interconnected part as well. And so I call that a discipline of seeing. So those three things are what I practice from at least a contemplative perspective.
And when you talk about living a connected life, sensing into presence and connection. These are the practices that lead you there, or do you mean more in this idea of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that what I would say is what's most important is balance, and the traditional mode of balance is body, mind, spirit. That's been written about for millennia. But I really do try to practice that. I was a distance runner for 25 years, and when my knees gave out, I was a competitive cyclist. And now, as I've mentioned before, as I approach my 8th decade, I try to get 10,000 steps in a day. And once in a while I'll go for a long bike ride. But I think, that's very, very important, because, sometimes you don't want to get on the bike and ride 50 miles. But if you can't discipline your body, you have little hope of disciplining your mind. And so the body is the easiest part of those 3 to discipline. And so you work on the body, I work on the mind. I try to read inspirational things daily. And then working on spirit, I think, is a process of working actively on the we in life. And I guess I'm guilty of interchanging the words we and spirit, because I think we is filled with spirit.